This is Idiot with a Library Card, and today I'm going to be talking about a book I read, and of course, I want to break down the book. But actually, I think what interests me about the book is not so much the story inside, but what the book is in itself. I know that sounds kind of vague, so just come along on this journey with me as I break down this book. Now, I know I have developed a kind of rhythm with these shows, and by now, I have at least named the book I'm going to be talking about, but I actually want to break down the front cover, because to me, it really represents the issues I have with the book itself. So there are 5 sets of text on this book's cover, each in a different font and size, and I'm going to start at the top and then work my way to the bottom. The topmost set of text, and I'm not exactly sure what it says because part of it is blocked by the library's barcode, but the part I get is MES best-selling author. Now, I think more than likely it says New York Times best-selling author, but I am a little curious because if it does say by New York Times best-selling author, that would be a lie. But that's really all I have to say about that part of the book, because the other parts will make clear what I'm talking about. It does lead into the next text. And this text is the largest font. And it's obviously the one the publishers really wanted people to see. And that's the name Tom Clancy. I took this book out of the library, as I mentioned earlier, because of the barcode. And I found it with Tom Clancy's other novels. It was under his name in the library. The issue is that this book was published in 2021, and Tom Clancy has been dead since 2013. And before you ask, no, this book was not published posthumously. It was written by another person. I know it would probably make Tom happy that his children or his estate is still making money from his name, but again, I have a small issue having Tom Clancy's name be the biggest thing on the cover. And that brings me to the next set of text, and it's the smallest on the cover. A Jack Ryan Jr. novel. Now, this was a revelation to me that there is a series of Jack Ryan Jr. novels, but there are, and it is probably the weakest part of the story, but also why this book even got on my radar. The weight of the Jack Ryan Tom Clancy universe is what weighs this book down and takes an okay action thriller novel and cheapens it. I'll get more into it when I talk about the story. But in the Jack Ryan universe, Jack Ryan becomes president of the United States, and his son becomes a super spy. I think one of the things I hate about this book is it gives me a feeling that this is how like Hunter Biden and Eric and Donald Jr. see themselves, as super cool men of intrigue and just all around awesome. And that irks me. That's not the book series' fault. At times when I read it, I feel like schlubby Hunter Biden is reading this book somewhere else, doing a line of coke and brokering some deal using his father's name and thinking of himself as a hero. But again, not really the author or the publisher's fault that we have had 2 presidents that have some awful and annoying children. The next part of the cover is the actual title of the book. It is the second largest font, Target Acquired. This is actually an appropriate name for this book, as it's really a very generic title for this type of book. And I don't quite get what it is referring to in the story. It seems like it was titled by a computer that puts action words together, and Target Acquire is what the computer came up with. Lastly, on the cover, and in the second smallest print, is by Don Bentley. This is the person who actually wrote the book. Now, I am glad I did a little research on him before I went on a complete negative rant about the author. The word hack would have been used a lot. And I would have gone on a rant about can he write his own stuff. Here's the thing. I don't think anyone is going to be writing books based on his characters after he dies. But he has written his own series with a cool leading character And he is, in fact, not only a veteran, but a war hero with a bunch of medals. So I want to be fair and say that one of the issues is that it is hard to get a book published. And maybe he had this idea for a story and just could not get it published without attaching it to a bigger name novel series. By the way, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan series is not the only series they have done this with. I was doing a little research, and actually this happens quite a lot, especially in the thriller, super manly, awesome character space. So the cover does have the seeds of the issue I have with this book all laid out. Now, to get into the story, Jack Ryan Jr. is in Israel to do some easy job for the CIA, but is taken away from this job because he saves a woman who turns out to be a scientist who invented some sort of chemical compound that would make things like planes and missiles undetectable by radar. He saves her from assassination twice, but her and her son, who is autistic, and this keeps coming up because when Jack Jr. was a kid, he had an autistic friend who was really attached to a penny, and this current child is really attached to a Captain America figure. The autistic angle seems like the author read an article about autism in Teen Vogue, and that this is what he based this child off of. But it doesn't really matter. Basically, the angle is used to get Jack to where he needs to be in the story. There's also a bad spy lurking in Israel. He's Iranian, but he looks American, and this helps him move through Israel without raising the suspicion of the Israeli security forces. Basically, the plan is to be able to send missiles into Israel that can evade the Iron Dome missiles. And there is some sort of cult in Syria that is going to be launching a bunch of these missiles at Israel that have warheads that are filled with poisonous gas. Those are the stakes. So eventually the woman and the child are captured and taken to Lebanon. And Jack, with his new Israeli agent friends, goes to Lebanon to save her. They take a strike team, but because of other actions the Iranian spy did, the Israeli security forces are compromised, and so they're ambushed. The Israeli strike team retreats, but Jack doesn't, so it's up to him alone to save the woman and her son. He's captured a few times. You know how these stories go. If you've ever read one of these or seen like a James Bond or Bourne Identity movie. But I will say the first two acts of the book really work. It's an okay to good spy thriller novel. It's got gadgets, an intrigue, fun action scenes, a good main bad guy with a group of other bad guys. There's a special forces B-plot where the compound that is going to launch the missiles is being watched by the American Special Forces, and they're going to try and stop the missiles from being launched. The first two acts make for an okay spy novel, as I said, with the exception of one issue, and that is that Jack Ryan Jr. not only has the same name as the current president, but is in fact his son. So to me, there are two clear ways to handle this. One is you have him fake everything, like his name, maybe he looks a little different. He can still be Jack Ryan Jr., and we can still call back to something the character we all love, Jack Ryan, gives him as a piece of advice, which they do in this book, or be the moral driver in the story, which is also something they kind of do in this book. You can even call back to other beloved characters in the story who taught him how to fight or how to do other spycraft. That's why you put Tom Clancy's name on the book, so you need to do it anyway. And trust me, they do a lot of it. But you have the other characters in the book not know he's the president's son. Or better yet, you hold it as a one-time card you can play, either to get him out of a jam towards the end of the novel, or more likely, how you play it is that it being revealed that he is the president's son makes things worse for him in a tight spot and really raises the stakes. The other thing you could do is lean into it. And a lot of the book would be him using his status as the president's son to get out of jams. Think Hunter Biden. But even better, it makes it a double-edged sword. He is able to meet and travel with less suspicion, but, for example, after he saves the son and mother the first time, it brings a bunch of media attention. And he has to dodge the media while doing his spy activities. This book makes the mistake of taking the middle road. He uses his real name. He works with and comes up against a bunch of agents and agencies in the intelligence world, and it's never mentioned that he is in fact the president's son. He gets picked up by the Israeli intelligence, and he gives them the name Jack Ryan. And no one says, oh, like the president, or, oh my God, you're the president's son. There's no mention of Secret Service or why the president's son is running around in the Middle East without any protection. The thing is, though, it is mentioned by Jack Ryan Jr. in his intermonologue that he is, in fact, the president's son. And anytime you're reminded that that's the case, it really takes you out of the story. And you start to think how stupid this all is. Before the last act, this is a solid spy novel if the spy is super spy John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. But every time you are reminded that the book is part of the Tom Clancy universe, it takes you out of a pretty fun story. This book basically takes place in the modern Middle East. All the historical events that have happened in the real world have happened here. And I did want to focus a little bit on kind of universes and extended literary or artistic universes, because it seems like it's a trend all over storytelling. But I just want to get to the end of the book. Jack is captured by the bad spy and a Russian lady spy. He is taken to the cult compound where the missiles are going to be launched. And they're religious zealots, like really extreme Muslims. And they are barbaric, so they're going to crucify Jack. They nail one of his arms to a cross. Then the special forces around the compound save him by sniping two of the three guys who are going to crucify him. He fights the other one and rips himself free of the cross. The rest of the book is an insane firefight between the cult and the special forces while Jack is running around the compound looking for the mother and child. The third act is like the writer ate a bad action set piece burrito and then had action set piece diarrhea. There's like 4 or 5 crazy things that happen, and Jack Ryan Jr. becomes an unstoppable superhero. I like the first 2 acts of this book. They're fun, and it's a nice mix of action and spycraft. The book goes absolutely off the rails at the end. It would have been better to spread some of these action set pieces out across the book and not just like stuff them all at the end. So I will say that this book as a generic action novel is okay. A little ridiculous, but fine. What I find more interesting is the unnecessary weight this book has to bear. This seems to happen more and more in media. This book really jumps on the one thing I really hate about remakes, and that is the box they seem to put the creators in when they're making it. The Last Jedi is an example that comes to mind, where Rian Johnson had an interesting idea of like blurring the dark side and light side to the Force and making the Star Wars story a little more morally ambiguous. Now, the execution of that was bad, but more, it seems like he was not able to do it. At the end of the movie, the bad guys were still the bad guys, and the good guys were still the good guys, and it ended how a Star Wars movie was supposed to end. These extended universes seem to only weigh down stories with their history and make it so when they tell the story in these settings, they are so burdened by the history and the past that it does not give the writer any freedom to do anything interesting or to take the stories somewhere you don't expect. All of the MCU after Endgame had to deal with the fact that half of the universe's population disappeared and reappeared 5 years later, and now that's a shadow that looms over all of their stories. If you write a Lord of the Rings show, it has to check all these boxes. And more than that, the dialogue has to have the Tolkien feel. I'm not big on saying things like big corporations are ruining our art, because they have made it possible to get the art and the stories I would never be able to get or see and experience into my hands. I think as consumers, we are a little to blame, as we generally don't seek out new stories and new characters. Again, this book is not terrible, but if you are a Tom Clancy Jack Ryan fan, maybe you'll like this book. But go out and find the next Tom Clancy and their next Jack Ryan. Find a book not burdened with stories of the past, and writers with the freedom to write new and interesting things. I'm telling you, there are books out there to read from great authors. I have not read Don Bentley's own books. I'd recommend reading them over these Tom Clancy knockoffs. There's a ton of great books out there, and of course I'd recommend you go to your local library and find one. The nice part is that if you don't like it, you can return it and get another one. No cost to you. Let's create or support the next generation of great characters. With that, please like, subscribe, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. You can check out Idiot with a Library Card on YouTube. Let me know if you are using other video streaming sites so that maybe I can get those videos up on there too.